Is an oven a necessity on every cruising boat? No, not for everyone, especially with some helpful alternatives out there. Hi, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley podcast, I'll share what you should consider when deciding whether to install an oven or buy a boat that already has one. And if you decide no, there's one thing that you can use instead. But first, today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Mantis Marine, maker of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models with and without a roll bar. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including their anchoring gear, scuba diving accessories, and a rechargeable waterproof headlamp for hands-free lighting. Visit mantismarine.com and see for yourself. Okay, so let's talk about ovens on the boat. Do you really need an oven? I get these emails like, we're replacing the stove on our boat and trying to decide if we should get one with an oven. Or, the boat we're thinking of buying doesn't have an oven. Is that going to be a problem? Or, will I be happy with just an Omnia stovetop oven? I get variations on all of these. And first of all, I'm going to say there's no universal answers. I've known cruisers on a 43-foot boat that replaced their stove and oven with just a cooktop because they had never used the oven in over 3 years of cruising and wanted the storage space. I've also known people with a 25-foot monohull that gave up the one large locker in their galley in order to put an oven in. If you truly never use your oven ashore, then it's pretty likely that you won't use one on the boat. And you're not going to care about stovetop baking options either. And frankly, you're not the ones asking this question. Then there are others who can't conceive of not having a normal oven. And likewise, they're not asking the question. The gray area comes with people who use the oven some, but wonder if it's really worth giving up the storage space to have one on a boat. And while they've heard of baking on the stovetop, they wonder how feasible it is to have as their only way to bake. If you don't ever intend to roast a chicken, turkey, or anything else that is particularly large, an Omnia stovetop oven works really well. I absolutely love mine and use it quite a bit on camping trips. And I've even been using it at other times working on the boat and doing things. The Omnia does a very, very good job of baking once you get used to the whole concept of baking on the stovetop. But it holds about as much as an 8x8 pan. If you want to bake larger quantities, you're going to have to do it in 2 batches. And if you want to bake 2 things at once, you'll have to have 2 of them. Foods tend not to brown on the top, and there is no broiler. So the questions to ask yourself are, how often do I bake? How often do I think I'll really bake on the boat? Now, if you're a weekend boater, you may prefer to have quick meals to make the most of the other activities that boating allow. Conversely, I know many full or part-time cruisers who have taken up baking as they have retired, moved a boat to boat, and now have time. Okay, the next question. How much time do I spend on the boat? What can work for weekends and the occasional week aboard may not suffice if you're living aboard full-time. Next, consider the storage space that you'll be giving up or gaining and how important it is to you. Remember that you can store some pans in the oven, and it's a good place to put small electronics in case of a thunderstorm to protect them from a lightning strike. Okay, using either a conventional oven or the Omnia puts heat into the boat. But the Omnia can also be used on the grill to keep heat out of the boat in hot weather. Will you want to bake things that are just too large for the Omnia? Will you want to broil? If you're only thinking of using the broiler to make toast, there are other options. But if you want it for other things, there really isn't. There is a learning curve with the Omnia. It's just not what many of us are used to using. It's not horribly difficult, but it may take using it a few times before you really get things to come out just the way you want. If you're the type that gets frustrated by this and will never try again if you have poor results the first time, stick with a conventional oven. Only you know if you'd consider baking on the stovetop just too much of a camping experience. For some people, having normal kitchen appliances, think like Mr. Coffee, refrigerator, the ability to have ice, they're musts for them. Others are happy as long as the food tastes good. If you're contemplating a new stove or a Galley refit, another important consideration is what size oven or stove you could install. If you only have room for a small one, carefully consider whether it will do what you are envisioning. All ovens are not created equal. The size oven is also important if you're buying a boat. Now you must have at least an inch of airspace on all sides of a pan, and 2 inches will give much better results. What size pan can you put in the oven? Smaller ovens tend to have far more problems with hot spots and losing heat every time the door is opened. If all you have room for is a stove with a tiny oven, you might actually be happier with the Omnia and baking on top of the stove. Now for me, I bake quite a bit. My personal preference would be to have a good-sized 3-burner stove and oven. But that's not possible on our existing boat. I have a tiny oven, and I have the Omnia that I use for other things too. For a weekend boat, particularly if it were smaller and storage space was an even bigger consideration, or if I couldn't have an oven that would hold at least a 9x13 pan, I would probably prefer the Omnia. Now there's links to learn more about the Omnia in the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. Be sure to subscribe. And please, if you like us, leave a 5-star review.
Slow down.